Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the first video that you will see on DMW Sports. Yes, this is DMac Wake. I am here debuting my own solo channel, and we're going to get this started with my NFL season preview for the 2024-2025 season. I am looking forward to this heavily. I appreciate everybody that's going to come by and see this video. Yes, this is ultimately going to start with the team that I think is going to be the worst in the league, the New Orleans Saints. I feel bad for starting at the bottom, but I feel like you work your way up for the season preview. I appreciate everybody for coming by once again. Anybody that watches the video, a lot of support, and I believe it means a lot to me that you would come by and watch. I'm going to have shorts that will be going out on this YouTube channel, DMW Sports. Please continue to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot, again, to me as I'm getting started in this venture. And in addition, please check me out on TikTok and Twitter as well, where you see some of that content and things that I'll be talking about as well. So appreciate everybody for coming by. And you know what? Let's go ahead and get right back into it. So I want to start out kind of looking at where their season in review ended up taking them. Saints ultimately finished 5-12 last year. Tough season to say the least. They had Derek Carr starting early on, got off to an okay start, and then eventually the wheels ended up falling off, firing Dennis Allen midway through the year, ultimately having interim head coach and Darren Rizzi finish out the year, and then ultimately having to replace him at the end of the season as well. Obviously, starting with that Derek Carr retirement, as far as subtractions are concerned, he walked away from the game seemingly due to a major piece of their injury, and then also some contract things as far as that is concerned. Ryan Ramczyk, who had been a mainstay on the Saints offensive line, one of the better tackles in the National Football League, also stepped away. Tyrann Mathieu, who I think has a bit of a Hall of Fame case, of course, coming from Chiefs fan perspective, somebody near and dear to my heart, stepped away from the game. Tyrann Mathieu had come over to the Saints and tried to be a leader as far as this defense was concerned that had needed a lot in recent years. Ultimately, Paulson Adebo, Peyton Turner, and Willie Gay Jr. were depth pieces that did end up leaving. Paulson Adebo had, some traction as far as a young cornerback, but never really was able to put it all together. So we'll see if he's able to, be able to provide some help for the Giants defensive back room. Ultimately, though, as they turned a new page and brought in a new head coach and added some things to the roster, Justin Reid headlined their offseason acquisitions as far as the 3-year deal that he signed coming over from those Chiefs. Isaac Yiadom also adds to their cornerback room. Brandon Cooks, veteran wide receiver in his second stint with the Saints, ultimately. Dylan Radins and Will Clapp added to that offensive line room to try and shore up what was an offensive line that struggled heavily last year, to say the least. Speaking of which, their draft, highlighted by Kellen Banks, seems to be penciled in as the starter as far as the left tackle is concerned from day one. Top 10 pick out of Texas, I should say. Somebody that I believe does provide the ability to come in and step in day one at left tackle and continue to grow and try and form a really nice pairing as far as bookend tackles in New Orleans. Surprise pick a little bit in the second round, Tyler Shough out of Louisville, a guy that showed some traits. Ultimately, to me, has more of a game manager ceiling. We'll talk more about the quarterback situations as we go further along. We'll see if that was too high a price to pay as far as the draft pick was concerned. Vernon Broughton, a guy that can add to their defensive line rotation, I think has a ceiling to be able to be a rotational player as far as the defensive line at the very least. I'll say Danny Stutzman, somebody that I really liked out of Oklahoma, and also a nod to my Tell the Truth teammate in CJ, who loved Danny Stutzman out of Oklahoma. Linebacker, smart kid, athletic enough, able to do some really interesting things. The fact that he gets to come in and learn from Demario Davis, I think, will help out a lot. Ultimately, Devin Neal, Kansas running back, adds to an interesting running back room. Devin Neal was highly productive at Kansas, maybe like some things as far as a highland ceiling. You put him in there with CEH, and obviously Kendre Miller coming back from injury to add to the headliner, of course, of Alvin Kamara. Interesting to see how that running back room ultimately shakes out as we get through training camp and ultimately to the season. So that offseason out of the way, let's take a look at an overview as far as their coach, front office grades, and then we'll get kind of into the quarterback discussion and the overall team direction as well. So for a Saints team for the last few years has been led by Mickey Loomis, obviously as the GM within that front office. They actually go out and hire Kellen Moore ultimately to be their head coach. Obviously Kellen Moore last year coming off a very successful year as the Eagles offensive coordinator, and now Moore is going to bring his offensive infrastructure to try and lead what is a Saints team that is finding its footing. Ultimately, you asked me what the team direction of this franchise is right now. The answer is tanking. They're getting some of the older players off their roster while still keeping some of those mainstays. You look at Demario Davis or Alvin Kamara, those guys seem like they want to retire as Saints and are being treated as such, rightfully so. And as this continues to move along, it feels like they're getting closer and closer to be able to put an offensive infrastructure around what will be their next big quarterback pick. And obviously, Tyler Shough being a top of the second round guy kind of satisfies that. It's always tough with day two guys. Those are guys that you don't necessarily pass up on highly drafted quarterback prospects if you say that this guy could be the number one guy for you moving forward. And so Tyler Shough seemingly will have some portion of this season, if not the full season. We'll see how the competition between him and Spencer Rattler goes to try and prove himself to be the guy moving forward. But if the Saints end up at the top of the draft again, I would expect that Kellen Moore and this, front office are going to collaborate on being able to bring in the quarterback that they feel can get them back to being a consistent winner as far as the National Football League is concerned. And so ultimately, head coach grade at Kellen Moore, we just haven't seen anything. So I'm not going to give him one. But front office wise, I'm concerned about the constant drumbeat of the Saints, don't handle the cap space right. They continue to overextend themselves, et cetera, et cetera. I would have thought that at some point they would have, quote unquote, eaten their medicine or just, ate their vegetables, et cetera, whatever metaphor you want to insert, to be able to say, hey, let's just take a reset year. We know we're going to be bad. There's no reason to push the chips all the way in and reset our cap. I think because of some of the retirements that they've got, because of Derek Carr's retirement, Ryan Ramchuk's retirement, Tyrann Mathieu' retirement, to a point that has helped out as far as their cap moving forward is concerned, but they just haven't been able to supplement their roster decisions with highly drafted hits as far as that's concerned. The young talent just isn't all that excessive on this team as it currently stands, specifically when you talk about in the trenches, even though, again, some of the most recent picks may be helping out with that from that aspect. And so it's a roster that is very hurting as far as the ability to put talent on the field, and there's not a lot for Kellen Moore to work with. However, there are guys like Chris Olave, like Alvin Kamara, like I talked about the book and tackles. If they can get those guys on the field, and I also mentioned Rashid Shaheed, who's a viable wide receiver too. If you guys can get them on the field at the same time, Kellen Moore maybe have something to be able to cook with. So front office wise, I have to see a more consistent draft record, better decision making as far as being able to navigate this cap before I can say that this isn't, at least an average front office as far as the National Football League is concerned. And we'll see moving forward if they can do that. But for right now, that grade is going to stay at a D. But along those lines, let's go ahead and get into the depth chart for this upcoming NFL season. So as you look at the New Orleans Saints depth chart as it currently stands, as far as our guys is concerned, it's not the best. I'll say that. If you're given an offensive grade, I would also give it a D, and it could be worse. I'll be honest with you guys, it could be worse. There are going to be worse offensive grades handed out from that standpoint. Again, this is when you're looking at the depth chart on paper. You find some places where you could be encouraged by some certain things. Again, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, I would even say Brandon Cooks is a viable, wide receiver 3, I suppose, if he's alive, because it's Brandon Cooks. He's eventually going to get hurt. You have to be able to try and just squint and find these guys on the field that makes you feel better about this. Alvin Kamara, viable starting running back, especially if Kendrick Miller can really provide that, backup aspect of it. Cam Akers, Devin Neal, CH. We'll see how that ends up, working out as far as that's concerned. And as far as we're going through the weapons, Juwan Johnson, gave a little bit of flashes at the tight end position. Could be interesting. We know Taysom Hill is existing, but of course he's hurt as well. We'll see if he ends up going back. I will say Maliki Matavao, I'll say out of UCLA, was a nice little UDFA tight end pickup for them. So we'll see if he ultimately gets some time in this upcoming season as well. You look at the offensive line. I mean, it's very tough as far as the interior is concerned. Trevor Penning has had his struggles on a consistent basis. Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz also had their struggles on a consistent basis. It's going to be tough for this interior offensive line. And ultimately, that's why they brought in a Dylan Radins and a Will Clapp to hopefully give some alternate options to be able to help out this interior offensive line that, frankly, was terrible last year. Will Clapp maybe could help a little bit at center if Eric fails, but ultimately, whoever they pick out of this 5 to be the starting 3 as far as the interior is concerned, I think it's going to be another struggle as far as that's concerned. More hopeful at the tackle position. Like I talked about, Kevin Banks Jr. out of Texas, a guy that I thought was a top 15 worthy selection as far as the 2025 NFL draft was concerned. He was somebody that you saw brought a power to the game, even though he has shorter arms, which, they talked about a little bit. Hey, are you going to move him inside? Are you going to leave him outside? I think it's fair to leave him at left tackle and see if he can survive there first and foremost. I think he has the athleticism to do so. I think there are inconsistencies as far as his hand placement is concerned, which I think does show up, especially when he's playing against length. It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening from that. But the biggest thing that I'm happy about the Kevin Banks pick is ultimately that slides Terry Fuaga, who I liked a lot at Oregon State, over to right tackle. Obviously, rookie last year did not have the biggest success at left tackle, but I think he's going to be much more comfortable at right tackle, and I think that's going to help him a lot. And we'll talk about him a little bit later on. So with the offensive grade being a D, let's go ahead and flip to the other side of the ball. As for the defensive side of the ball, you're looking at a defense that has gone through some changes. Obviously, like we talked about, losing Tyrann Mathieu, breaking in Justin Reed, moving on from Paulson Adebo, trading Marshawn Lattimore, who was obviously a leader for the secondary for a long time, had some injury issues over to the Commanders last year as well. Still highlighted up front by some players that I think can bring some things to the table. Obviously, it starts with the mainstay, the guy that has continued to be the stalwart as far as this team is concerned, and Cam Jordan going on, I think his 11th year, I think it is now, I'm sorry, now his 14th season. He was drafted in 2011, going into his 14th season, which is crazy to think about. But shout out to Cam Jordan, still kicking. Chase Young, who I thought actually gave them some solid snaps, for the majority of last year, never really going to reach that ceiling as a dynamic alpha pass rusher that he was obviously drafted at. But I think he has settled into being a competent starter in some ways. Obviously, the interior is led by Brian Bresee, who was a first-round pick for them 2 years ago. Ultimately, has continued to make slow improvements, but I would not say anything significant. They also traded for Davin Kajak from New England to be their nose tackle as well. Guy that I really like, Colin Saunders, of course, made the interception against Patrick Mahomes on Monday Night Football last year in a very funny moment. But shout out to Colin Saunders, in my opinion, a useful rotational defense tackle. And they, because they play a little bit more of that odd front, it's an interesting way that they try and pigeonhole Colin Saunders in there. But he is somebody that can give you good snaps because he has the athleticism to do so. And I mentioned, obviously, Vernon Broughton, who I think can be a rotational factor as far as that team is concerned as well. You also see Christian Boyd. I'm going to be having my eyes on how many snaps he ends up getting, because I liked him as more of a late round defensive line swing in the 2024 NFL draft. So we'll see how he continues to kind of mature and come into his own as well. As far as the linebacker room, Pete Warner never really has gotten his footing as far as National Football League is concerned. Carl Granderson is there as an outside linebacker addition as well. The two guys that I'm focused on, Demario Davis, who has continued to be a mainstay at the second level of his defense, not quite the all-pro level that he was a few years ago, still a good player in my personal opinion, with limitations. That's where Danny Stutzman, in my opinion, comes in as a real pairing with him to be able to provide a different, kind of look, really good athleticism, was the green dot at Oklahoma, plays the game with instincts, in my opinion. I think he's really going to help out this second level of the defense. And I like the fact that he gets to now learn from Demario Davis. And then you look at the secondary, it's a little tough. It's a little tough, is putting it nicely. Kool-Aid McKinstry, you're not seeing much from them. They obviously added Isaac Yiadom. I didn't think he was all that great as far as San Francisco was concerned, and they had their struggles in the secondary as well last year. Justin Reed, somebody coming over from the Chiefs who was a leader as far as the Chiefs defense was concerned, has limitations of coverage, but he is going to set a tempo on a consistent basis, and that's something you have to give Justin Reed credit for. Alontae Taylor has continued to have his own struggles as well. They also signed Julian Brackman to try and give them some safety help after Tyrann Mathieu ultimately retired as well. So we'll see. They obviously took Jonas Sanker, safety, in the third round, and also added Quincy Riley out of Louisville in the cornerback in the fourth round, which actually was a pick that I didn't mind as far as a day three corner to take a swing on. So we'll see if Quincy Riley can try and find his footing and help out the secondary that really does need it. Ultimately, I don't think it's as bad as the offense. I put it around a C minus as far as offense or defensive grade is concerned. And along those lines, I do want to focus in on a few guys as far as the team is concerned that make me excited, and I expect to have a little bit of a better year and help out this team to be better than it was last year, if that's possible or in the cards. So, look, we're going to briefly mention the fact that I do have Spencer Rattler currently as my 32nd ranked quarterback for understandable reasons. I thought that you saw some of the arm talent that ultimately made him a 5-star quarterback prospect, obviously, when he was initially going to Oklahoma. I thought that he improved from a maturity standpoint and his ability to process when he went to South Carolina. And you saw some of those things translate to the NFL as far as, his year here at the Saints. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. And I think that 32nd ranking is also going to apply to Tyler Shough, who is a rookie that's coming in that is, in my opinion, under-talented for the quarterback position. Probably looking at a career backup at best, but ultimately Tyler Shough is somebody that we'll see what he can bring to the table and how fast the mind for the game can make up for some of the talent deficiencies. But I will say I put some of Spencer Rattler's best throws on the field from last year on the screen because I feel like it is important to highlight the fact that some of the highlights from Spencer Rattler were kind of impressive. And honestly, he's going to be kind of important for fantasy, in my personal opinion, because if Tyler Shough is his quarterback, I'm very concerned about where things are going to go from a fantasy perspective. And that's assuming that the weapons obviously stay healthy that we'll talk about. But yes, Saints right now, 32nd rate quarterback situation. We'll go ahead and talk a little bit about some things that actually do get me excited as far as the Saints offense is concerned right now. We've got Chris Olave and some intermediate catches. And I think that Chris Olave is somebody from a talent perspective that is looked down upon at this current moment in time. Gets lost in the Ohio State wide receiver shuffle for all the factory or the wide receivers that factory has pushed out in recent years. He has all the talent in the world, in my opinion, to actually be a true number one wide receiver in the National Football League. I think he gets out of cuts in a really impressive way. Is not bothered by physicality at the line on a consistent basis, has the speed, has the acceleration, ball tracking down the field, and certainly has reliable hands from that standpoint. They move him in and out last year as far as offensive system is concerned. I expect Kellen Moore to do a lot of that while he's on the field as far as that aspect of it. Of course, the massive question mark is, hey, is Chris Olave going to be healthy? I think if you ask me on this team, what gets me excited about this coming season for the Saints that I don't necessarily think is going to be all that good, it's watching Chris Olave play the wide receiver position because I think he's really good at it when he's on the field. And if he is on the field, I think he can have a 1,100-yard type of season. 8 touchdowns is within the cards. Quarterback situation, of course, matters. Offensive tackles, them being really good, of course, matters, and what Kellen Moore can do with the rest of this offensive game plan is going to be a big piece of that. But I like watching Chris Olave play wide receiver, and that's why I put him on the screen, and he's the thing that gets me excited as far as this team is concerned. With Chris Olave being the reason why I'm excited about this upcoming season for the Saints, I am concerned, of course, about the offensive ecosystem as far as Kellen Moore is concerned. And the reason why I say this is because ultimately this season, in my opinion, is going to be about tanking for the Saints. And tanking in the National Football League isn't really tanking. It's not like they're intentionally trying to lose games. They're going to go out there and try their best, and they're going to pull some wins off that ultimately come out of nowhere, even if their talent level would suggest that it wouldn't be possible, because that's the way it goes as any given Sunday. Ultimately, though, this season, can you establish yourself with the 2 bookend tackles, Kellen Moore's offensive system to make you feel good about investing in quarterback high at the 2026 NFL draft, in which you expect to be a much better draft class as far as quarterback prospects is concerned coming out? Kellen Moore obviously was able to do some good things in diversifying the Eagles offense last year. Are you going to be able to take that situation in which you had every advantage from a talent on paper aspect and then make this situation in which you are basically working at a deficiency in pretty much every aspect and turning into a valuable offensive ecosystem that it feels okay to put a young quarterback in and try and develop, is going to be my biggest question mark and judgment as far as the Saints season is concerned. I can tell you the interior offensive line is concerned. The defense really is as a whole is a concern, especially in the secondary. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed staying healthy is a concern. Alvin Kamara's health at his age is a concern. The quarterback situation is a concern. But ultimately, this season, can Kellen Moore come in, establish himself as a competent head coach, and put an offensive ecosystem in that you feel good about dropping that young quarterback in is my number one concern for the Saints. I actually really do like this Danny Stutzman. I think that what Danny Stutzman can bring to the table, learning from Demario Davis, continuing to get better from the mental side of the game, on top of the instincts he already possesses and the athleticism that he has, he is somebody, in my personal opinion, that will be a Pro Bowler. You go 3 years down the line and get there from that standpoint. That's how much I do believe in Danny Stutzman as a linebacker prospect. Or ultimately, he could go the way of Zach Bond and ultimately move on somewhere and then end up being that Pro Bowler. But I won't bring that up for right now. Saints fans, I'm sorry as far as that aspect is concerned. But that's my bold prediction. Now, the hot take that I have is that I think that lost in the Cam Jordan Hall of Fame discussion, which is understandable, is that there actually is a real conversation around Demario Davis possibly being a Hall of Famer for, the National Football League is concerned whenever he decides to hang his cleats up. This is somebody that does have 5 All-Pro selections, 4 of which are All-Pro second team, which will hurt him a little bit. Does have the first team as well. 2-time Pro Bowler, which is a whole conversation as far as Pro Bowl is concerned. Did not really get started until into his 30s as far as being able to be a really high-level impact linebacker. And that tells you about kind of how much the instincts of the position really do matter, as we just talked about with Danny Stutzman. It'll be fascinating to see when his time comes up. I think it's a sneaky Hall of Fame case for Demario Davis, who's been a really good linebacker for a really long time. And very specifically at this position, it's a tough thing to be able to do. But he's got some individual accolades that would tell him at least that it becomes a conversation. Does he get in? Is ultimately going to be tough as far as outside looking in. But Demario Davis, in my personal opinion, I think gets lost in the shuffle as people kind of talk about guys like Cam Jordan and his ability to put together a Hall of Fame case is concerned. So shout out to Demario Davis, mentoring Danny Stutzman, and we'll see when he does decide to put up those cleats for right now. I'll wrap up my Saints preview here. I find it really tough to believe that ultimately they are going to be a good football team. I think the quarterback situation is very poor. The secondary is extremely poor. There are question marks on each side of the ball as far as the trenches are concerned. They really lack that, alpha level pass rusher that you can build a defense around, in my opinion. Second level, I think, will be solid as far as defense, which is nice to see. But ultimately, because of the injury question marks of Olave, of Kamara, of Shaheed, of Juwan Johnson to add on top of it, because the interior offensive line, in my opinion, is probably going to end up being very bad. Even with the young tackles, even with Kellen Moore coming in, I think ultimately this is going to be a 3-win football team going 3-14, which feels, unfortunate for the Saints. But ultimately, if this tanking season leads to their next franchise quarterback, I think that the Saints fans will be happy about that. And I think everybody appropriately in New Orleans Saints world has low expectations for this team as well. So that's a wrap on my first team. Again, we're going to be coming back with each of the 32 franchises as we lead into the 2024-2025 NFL season. Again, please go check out DMW Sports on all platforms, as you see there on the right side of the screen. And please